Welcome to the Block and Tackle Show, hosted by Carl Block. Carl is a partner in the law firm of Loeb & Loeb here in Los Angeles, California. He will be tackling some of the biggest issues in business today. Listen, learn, and enjoy as he leaves no stone unturned during deep conversations with some of today's most amazing business leaders. Welcome to the show.
So why don't we talk about space and aerospace for a sec? Okay, what are you looking at? What kinds of investments are you trying to make in that area? And where do you see there's going to be future opportunities for you in terms of
Sure. So, one of the investments we made, which, we're very bullish on, is a company that is pretty fascinating. They're a space holding company. So they were designed to go and take control positions in companies that were already operating in space,
Uh-huh.
generating revenues, doing useful things like robotic arms or airlock systems on the space station. So from a business perspective, I liked it because you can think of it like a Berkshire Hathaway, right? So a combination of all these interesting companies. They just happen to be operating in space and generating revenue. So I like that kind of model. And then the other component was that one of their companies has been operating on the International Space Station for years, and they've got a great space heritage. And as you or your listeners may know that our current space station, the International Space Station, or ISS, is beyond its useful life. It's old. It's falling apart. It's coming down by the end of the decade. And oh, by the way, we also share it with Russia. So this is a little bit of a problem from a strategic standpoint. It's an imperative that the United States maintains the high ground. So when we made this investment in this company, we knew that they were going to be one of the groups that was vying to build the next space station, but it was going to be privately owned, privately operated, where NASA would be the client. So very similar to what SpaceX did. They said, we're going to take our money, we're going to build these rockets, we're going to do them cheaper, and then NASA, you can pay and get a ride when you want to put your astronauts up in space or send satellites. So in a way, SpaceX kind of guided that. And now that we can get to space, the next stage is these privately owned and operated space stations. So then that's one step closer to the moon, and then one step closer to Mars. But along the way, we like it in that they're generating pretty meaningful revenue, and they're winning some pretty large contracts with our government customers.
So I completely understand the logic of that investment, no doubt. We'll talk about exploration maybe in a little bit, but that's great. Do you see this as really almost a nascent amount of investment? And I mean, I know that there are people like SpaceX in this, but do you see that this market generally is really, really vast? Or do you see we're sort of in the middle of the curve or towards the end of the end, and it's going to be a very mature type thing? What's your feeling on that?
I think space, pardon the pun, is wide open. I really feel like it's the analogy is like the internet in the early '90s. So we know there's a there. We know there's something really incredible and powerful. Not exactly sure how it's going to develop and how the economy is going to develop there, but I've seen reports from large investment houses that say the space economy could be $1 trillion by the end of 2040. So it sounds crazy, but it's what, 15, 16 years out. I mean, it can be here like that. And I think the space economy has a lot of room to grow. There's a lot to do. There's a lot of things that, once we're up there and operating on a more consistent basis, who knows where we can go from there. So I think there's a lot to do in a lot of growth there.
Okay, that's interesting. So talk a little bit about cyber. What are you looking at in cyber?
Yeah. So cyber's tricky, and it's tricky because it's moving so fast, and the level of attacks that are happening are so fast and so quick and so pernicious. I mean, that puck is moving very, very quickly. And for the cyber companies that we look at, we also know that there's some pretty big hurdles in place, because a lot of the big Fortune 500 companies, they already kind of have their cyber tools in place, and whatever is new had better be really, really good, because it's either got to be it's fighting you're fighting for budget room to either replace what they already have. So a rip and replace is always tough in any kind of field,
Sure.
or to be so good and so different that it's in addition to what they already have, and they've got to bump spend to go get that. So we spend a lot of time. One of our advisors is one of the world experts on this topic. So we'll see interesting companies, and then we'll run it by him and say, is this something that you all would buy? Are they really doing something different? Are they doing something unique? How is the pricing model? Do we think this can really be value added? So we have a different lens for companies in that space.
And listen, it's not surprising in any fund that you're going to look at, one business segment that is wide open and another one that is a little bit trickier. But still, I mean, probably beyond the scope of this podcast, and not something that maybe you want to be on camera talking about, but the ability of cyber, the ability of or what could happen with cyber threats is
it's really, you can get pretty dark pretty quickly. And just to start thinking about things such as the growth of AI and overlaying AI capabilities, both from an offensive and defensive perspective, your mind can certainly go to some pretty interesting places. And that's a space where we're really spending more time on, is how is this generative AI being used in cyber, more so for defensive cyber capabilities to defend against other attacks that are also being driven by, these potentially very pernicious state actors that are coming at us.
Understood. And believe me, there's a lot of questions I'd like to ask you on camera about that, and we could have a great discussion. But frankly, I'm a little bit uncomfortable myself talking about it and picking your brain about that. But I totally understand. And I totally understand why it would be important to have, emerging funds and other people taking a look at this. Well, one of the things I think we find in industry generally is that, and this is a plug for venture funds generally, you get a lot of very big businesses, and then they become like aircraft carriers. You can't turn them very quickly, and you can't be that nimble, and there's all kinds of reasons that you can't take risk in investing in new technologies. Venture funds don't have that problem. And I could see how there would be a way that some of the best tools in cyber defense are going to be developed through venture investments, not necessarily at some of the larger tech companies. It doesn't mean that they won't come up with their own new versions of what they have, but to the extent it's beyond the scope of what they're doing right now, wouldn't surprise me at all if you end up, getting into companies that are actually going to be disruptors in the space too.
Oh, 100%. I mean, look, we're in the business to take risk, and we wouldn't be in this business unless we had great investors that knew and understood that, and they were, banking on us as a professional management team to go find the best companies and with the best shots at creating, the most impactful products. But knowing that you're going to lose some along the way, maybe lose a lot of them along the way, but you're banking that, ultimately you're going to find some of the most material companies that come out of this innovation ecosystem. And it is very important, because you're right, a lot of the big companies, they're not focused on it. They don't want to take the risk. They're very happy to kind of continually doing business as usual. And in a way, I'm thankful for that, because if you think about our whole space, this aerospace and defense innovation ecosystem, it's because we've got 5 large prime contractors. And I don't want to pick on them too much, but when you add up the big 5, it's about 500 billion in market cap. The public companies, they're managing quarter to quarter, and the shareholders want steady dividends and share buybacks and big, massive contracts to build exquisite systems like B-21 bombers and aircraft carriers and submarines. And so when you've got that quarter to quarter pressure, and you've got to focus on these big multi-billion-dollar contracts, are you going to spend a lot of money trying to innovate and incubate these companies down here that could take 5 or 10 years to develop? And even then, that revenue is really not going to make an impact on your quarterly earnings. I mean, you tell me, what do you think?
No, of course. And then, of course, the other thing you didn't say is the activist shareholders, and sometimes maybe known as the smartest people in the room. And and wanting to micromanage everything you do. So I totally get it. But
Well, that's actually cool though. For us, it opens up a huge
no, I understand.
landscape of opportunities.
No, that makes perfect sense. So, you've flirted with talking about autonomous technology and AI. And by the way, for those of my viewers and listeners, they know that I've had a few people on who talk about AI and many different things. But you're the only defense guy, and so even the dual use type stuff. So, what are you looking at, and where do you see that industry going?
Sure. So out of everything right now, those are the two areas that I'm probably most excited about and most uh, passionate about, and especially as you think about where the Department of Defense needs to go. And what's also gratifying is that now it knows that it needs to go there, right? If you look at, let's just take the Navy for example, and our competitors in the Pacific. So one has a Navy of 450 ships, and we've got a Navy of 297. Shipbuilding capabilities and ships number of capital ships are going like that there and going like this here. So if we wanted to go head to head in capital ships, we'd have to go back and double and triple the size of an already large defense budget, going back to the days of President Reagan and Secretary Lehman and the 600 ship Navy. So that's not incredibly feasible. So what we need to do is a recognition that we need autonomous systems that are by nature unmanned, that have the ability to be low cost, very quickly scalable, that can use some AI, techniques to help manage and maneuver a lot of these assets. So what I'm really talking about here is a massive expansion in autonomous systems, meaning drones, either underwater, surface of the water, surface craft, small drones in the air, all the way to medium-sized drones, all the way to fighter jets that are unmanned. So it's a whole system of systems that we are starting to build, and a lot of these innovative companies are starting to build, both from the hardware perspective and the software perspective. So it's really just an absolutely fascinating time to be investing, because we're seeing the fruits of a lot of this labor and capital in this space, and it's happening right before our eyes.
Now I get it. I would say literally, I was thinking, okay, how much is Neil going to say right now about air, land, and sea? Because as you probably know, the average person who pays attention to this just thinks about drones in the air. And I don't want you to say anything that you don't feel comfortable about, but the idea that there are going to be autonomous operating things on land and on the top of the sea and undersea is not something that a lot of people are thinking about. And do you want to give a peek or a window
Sure.
into?
Absolutely. So I think one of the things that's out there, and you can read about it, you can look it up on YouTube, you can see it, is look at the war right now between Russia and Ukraine. The Ukrainians have proven to be very adept, very crafty, very frugal, but also very aggressive. I mean, they've created a surface a surface sea drone uh, relatively inexpensively, and their use of that drone has taken out about one third of the Russian fleet in the Baltic Sea. So can you imagine a hundred, maybe $200,000 drone taking out a $1 billion destroyer? That's a pretty good payoff, right? And if you think about what happened in Israel about a month ago with the strike from Iran, so a combination of 300 drones and missiles from Iran that probably cost them anywhere from 50 to $100 million. The defense for that, north of $1 billion. If you add up the Iron Dome, the Israeli defense, the UK defense, the US defense, so exquisite, and we got them all down. So that worked. But this huge cost gap is something that we've got to really go after, and that's where we spent a lot of time, at least on our side, thinking, what are these companies that can do something that's relatively cheap, that's massively effective, that can make our adversaries think twice, and can be massively scalable and impactful. So we're looking at a company right now that makes an underwater drone. They've within a year, they've actually created these prototype drones. They're about 5 feet big. You can interchange the payload. It is dual use, so you can put a sensor package on it or a kinetic package on it, and they're operating. And we're going to get behind them and help them build and grow and scale and get them into the places with the Navy, both big Navy and special warfare, where they can make an impact, not
So,
only for adversaries.
okay, in that regard, let's talk about the commercial application here. And again, I'm trying to be very sensitive to
Sure.
not asking you hard questions, but I think you know me well enough to know what's going through my mind. So, in the commercial applications of the underwater drones, is this going to be sort of like, looking for, when a cargo ship goes down, being able to see what happened, if there's people alive there, that sort of thing, or if there's, seemingly gas coming up from the bottom of the ocean that you're able to safely send a drone down there so that you can see what's going on? Is it stuff like that?
Sure. So, with this company in particular, they're going to develop a series of drones. Some are smaller that have a specific use case. Some are larger that can have different payloads that can go deeper, that can go out longer. So, in the go deeper, go longer phase on the commercial side, think about all the undersea fiber optic cables that we have. I think there was even an article in the journal a couple of days ago about the concern over defense of these communication cables. So drones like this could go down and do surveys of cables to make sure that they're fine, or they could kind of lay in wait as a defensive capability. Think about offshore oil rigs and checking checking those rigs for any potential leakages. Think about the terrible disaster we had in Baltimore a couple months ago, where you've got parts of that bridge that are down. You might have people that are down there.
Mm.
Sending a small drone with a sensor package can help identify where wreckage is, can help identify and maybe save lives. So there's a lot of different use cases for something like this.
Understood, and it's fascinating, really. Again, I don't think most people have given a lot of thought to underwater drones or drones based on land, at all, even though you're thinking about it and clever people are thinking about it. And you're smiling, which is great. Our viewer,
Well, I
our
don't know
listeners don't know that.
how clever I am. Our job is to go find the really clever ones that are starting these companies. I mean, these are really terrific entrepreneurs that are very smart, very passionate, putting it all on the line in a particular company to achieve a mission. And that's my hat goes off to all these bold founders out there that are doing that. And we are in a very interesting position where we get to, and it's fun actually. We get to look at all these different companies and then get to narrow that down and pick a handful, relatively speaking, that we really get behind and put our time and capital and expertise into helping them grow. But for the most part, we're taking minority positions, and it's really up to the founders and the teams to
Sure.
build, grow these iconic companies.
Okay. And one more question about these kinds of companies where you have the dual use. Are the founders more people who come from the commercial side typically, or are they more ex-defense guys like you who are like, we need this and look and see what you could do commercially? Where does it sort of shake out for you?
I would say most of them are technologists and entrepreneurs. Um, Most have this kind of mission mindset where they believe that they can create something that can be incredibly useful in many different cases. There's a handful that have a military background, like the company I was talking about earlier, the space holding company. The
Mhm.
co-founder is former Air Force Academy, total patriot, F-15 decorated pilot, and then went off to investment banking and then launched that company. So he definitely has a bent towards we are a mission driven company and we need a space station because we need to achieve supremacy in space, which is the new high ground. And our adversaries have an active space station with military astronauts, and we need one. And if we don't have one, we're going to lose up there.
Understood. So you mentioned also you take minority positions. I assume that you don't want to be in the business of running these companies. You want a board seat, but you when you're doing your diligence, so much of it is the character of the founders, and can we trust them, and do we think that they actually appreciate the dynamic of getting venture money, and having the diligence that they need to have to do things, and the accountability and the timelines. You don't really want to be in a business of running these companies or taking them.
No, no, not at all. I mean, that's why I think venture by nature is these are passive positions, and I think in our space in particular, this kind of defense tech ecosystem, we like to back founders that want to have a diverse cap table where you have different investors that bring different skill sets, can really be a true advisor to them, give them guidance, but it's up to them to really run the company. I mean, it really is. I mean, they've got to execute on their mission, and we'll be there to poke and prod. And they know that they've got a limited amount of time and capital to hit their marks. I mean, generally speaking, 18 months to 2 years. Although there's a newer trend now that's happening where some funds will write a bigger check up early and just say, listen, here's enough money for 3 or 4 years. Put your head down, go do it, and then come back. That's one way to do it, and we're seeing some of that now. But generally speaking, the founders know they've got X amount of dollars, X amount of time. You better hit these marks, or you're not getting any more capital, or you're having a down round, and you're going to get crammed down, or your people are going to leave, and you'll be in a death spiral.
And
So
that makes a lot of
until they
sense.
have to execute.
That makes a lot of sense. So, Neil, you mentioned, the investment portfolio. You mentioned the diligence you do with the team and what you want with the founders. But let's talk a little bit about the advisory capacity. What kind of advice are you usually given to your portfolio companies?
Sure. Happy to get into that. So we're a little bit different in that our portfolio strategy is 80% early stage, which we define as seed, Series A, Series B, and then 20% later stage. And the reason I bring that up in relation to your question is that the more mature the company is, I mean, the less help they really need from us, the less help and
Sure.
guidance. However, we like to have exposure to some of the bellwether names that have really broken out, because we have great relationships with the leadership teams there, and in many cases we can bring them new ideas, new companies, introduce new partnerships for them. So it's a good relationship to have. But on the earlier side, I mean, this is frankly where we have a lot more fun. We can really help shape and guide at the earlier stages of the company. Oftentimes we do a lot of our guidance, frankly, in the diligence period, and a lot of it is the testing back and forth to see how the founders think about how they're going to set up their milestones, what their sales pipeline looks like, how they're thinking about probability of wins, where they're going to focus their time, which products they're going to focus on, how they're going to price that, what types of margins are they going to look for, kind of getting real with whatever it is that whatever product or service that they've created. Are they really solving a need, and who needs that right now, and where are they going to go? So putting all that together and kind of seeing the give and take with how flexible they are, it really informs us on who we want to partner with. So it's a big part of what we do early on. And then after we write the check, we continue to roll up our sleeves and help these companies get into the right areas where they can grow faster and get bigger and better contracts and bigger and better relationships that'll help them continue to grow and iterate.
That's great. Okay, so look, this has been really helpful. I think it gives people a great sense of, the business you're in, what you're doing with your investment philosophy, and some of the stuff that's on the table right now. Want to take a minute and talk about what you think are going to be trends in new technologies in the defense or dual use areas that you're going to be like, hey, 2 years, 4 years, 5 years, whatever from now, you're going to see technologies that do X or Y. So any thoughts about that?
Sure. So I think the good news is we really hit on a bunch of them already.
Mhm.
So space, again, this is the new high ground, and we need to control our own destiny in space as much as possible. So we can't take our eye off the ball there and really focus. Um, On the pure defense side, hypersonics is an area that we've probably lagged, behind. So I think you're going to see a continued effort on hypersonics. This isn't something that we particularly focus on that closely because it's pretty kinetic and there's not a whole lot of dual use for it. I mean, there are a number of interesting companies that are working on hypersonic aircraft for commercial use, but that's kind of in the out years. So we want to see how that really progresses. Obviously, we touched on AI. So the continued development of generative AI and how that works with some of these command and control systems and how they can operate ultimately a lot of these autonomous systems that are scalable and numerous, and just too hard for a human to process and maneuver and make these very quick decisions when they're out in the field. And that also is going to translate into what the commercial aspect is going to need. Robotics, another huge one. You probably saw the big round early this year with Figure. Tesla is building an autonomous robot to reduce a lot of human labor. So I think you're going to see a lot of growth there. And then also, further robotics that are doing a lot of, manual type, labor that humans they really don't want to do it. It's not really highest and best use. So a lot of just really fascinating things are happening, and I don't see it slowing down. And I also don't see, unfortunately, our adversaries slowing down. And I think you could make an argument that we're probably in, one of the most dangerous times from a geopolitical standpoint since the late 1930s. So this is going to drive a lot of urgency and a lot of spend into some of these high growth, high tech areas that we need, frankly, to offset some of our deficiencies when it comes to just going head to head with some of our adversaries who have just built up some pretty impressive and massive scale against us.
I understand that. I think, without speaking for you, you would say that the absence of a lot of government control and government planning has allowed people to compete for various things, and that competition has brought about a lot of innovations, much more so than in other countries, which historically has been a blessing for us and given us a competitive advantage. And I assume you think that's also going to help us going forward.
100%. I mean, you assume correctly. I think the great news is the spirit of America and the spirit of the free market and capitalism is alive and well. I mean, almost all of the capital going into this to our innovative space is from the private sector. I mean, it's a very, very small amount from the government, at least right now, especially at the very innovative stages. And our expertise in AI and autonomous systems, and then marrying that up with, I think, the political will with our latent capabilities of this juggernaut that is the American industrial machine. If we can just put the will together with the inherent capabilities and then just do it, we can get there and we can do it. And I think of it like a Freedom's Forge 2.0, which is a great book about the buildup of America in the late 1930s and early 40s. So America has done it in the past, and we can do it again. And we've got the raw skills and the capability. We just need the will to do it.
Well said. So, listen, it has really been a pleasure having you on today, Neil. You're a great guest. You obviously are not shy about expressing your opinions, and you do it in a very persuasive and direct way. It's been really, really good to have you. And for the viewers, if you have any questions about what Neil and I talked about, you can email me at carl@blockandtackleshow.com. I always have to remind people the and is not an ampersand, so it's blockandtackleshow.com. And if there are questions for me, I'd be happy to answer them. If there are questions for Neil, I'll get them to him. So, but thanks a lot for coming, Neil.
Thank you, Carl. It was great.
Thanks for tuning in. If you want more info on the show, please visit blockandtackleshow.com. And you can also email me at carl@blockandtackleshow.com. Thanks for tuning in.